What's up everyone, Jake here from Monsters and Munchkins with another song tactics report. Today we have our first post-patch game. Being we finally have the patch with us, I decided that it was long enough, I needed to man up and play Erik Commander to get my Greyjoy badge completed on stats. Last time I tried this, I think I lost about 100 ELO, because every game I played I loaded into was super meta Jon Ranger Hunters, and Erik got his gold line dash stomped into oblivion. Now, I don't really care, ELO is just a number, it goes up and down, but it was pretty disheartening to say the least, and I wasn't excited to play him again. When I saw someone ask for a casual game on a Sunday morning, and then confirm over DMs that they wanted a casual game, I decided this was the perfect game to attempt Erik again. Lo and behold, I encountered my old friend Jon Snow. Let's get into today's game. Now, there is no universe in which I think Jon Snow anywhere remotely near Ranger Hunters is a casual list. Pretty Boy is just unbelievably strong, as are his friends with bows and daggers that hit on threes in both ranged and melee. But thankfully, my opponent's list was was pretty far from optimal for Jon, and I feel like that at least gives me a bit of a fighting chance. So to start off, Jon Snow is obviously his commander, and he's sitting in Ranger Hunters. Jon, with the new with Furious Charge instead of Rally Cry, makes that unit hit really hard now. His other unit he took was Sworn Brothers, which a Watch Captain. The new Watch Captain is pretty good in Night's Watch. I gotta say that Relentless, while it no longer hitting 9 activations, is definitely bad for them. Their overall list building, I think, got more deadly and maybe stronger in some aspects. I don't know. We'll have to see. Next up, he has Golden Company crossbows with Bronn, which is a unit I'm definitely pretty sus of. I can see the argument for taking crossbows into some matchups, but in your primary list, I definitely would not be running them. This is an 8-point unit. That could be Ranger Vanguard. I'm just not seeing what that's really doing, having a dedicated ranged unit in this type of list, especially in the way he winds up using them. That definitely would have been better as Ranger Vanguard. I would have had to play way differently. Then his next unit, he's got a Watch Marshal and Coldhands, which Coldhands is always super good, has that super broken combo with Jon's cards. I don't really see a reason for most Night's Watch lists to not run Coldhands. Next up, he only has 2 NCUs, which I feel is a big mistake in Night's Watch now, considering how strong their NCUs are. He has Bowen Marsh and Donal Noye. There's no way that the Watch Marshal is worth more than Aemon. It's just not possible that having the Watch Marshal is any way more valuable. The Golden Company crossbows with Bronn, if we cut Bronn and we just ran Ranger Vanguard, that could have been points somewhere to run the new, pretty broken at 5 points, Corn. So, like I said, still really strong Night's Watch. The deck is gross. Ranger Hunters are gross. So it's hard to make a bad Jon list. I'm just saying it's not the most optimal Jon list, thankfully for me. For my list, I'm kind of running generic Greyjoy good stuff. Not like Flayed Men, but actual Greyjoy units to pretend like Erik's cards can actually do something. I'm trying out the newly buffed House Harlaw Reapers. This is a unit that I've always really loved playing in casual games, with Euron Commander for the super memey panic bombs. But competitively speaking, their best use was to try to one-shot something, which they can do, but they usually fall a little bit short of. Effectively now, with the way their rules work, and the new card will be up on the screen, starting with 1 pillage token, effectively, they don't really start with 1, but they effectively start with 1, and they effectively go up to 3. And the 6 dice on second rank really help. While I would like to see pillage get an overhaul, so it's just a good mechanic, this at least feels like a change to start to move in the right direction. For my list, Erik is in a unit of Bowmen. Then I've got Asha in a unit of Bowmen. I still think Warcry is good in Greyjoys. The fact that we get it on a 1-point attachment that also improves the unit's morale to 5 is very strong. And we have Finger Dance in the deck. So if we've got Finger Dance on Asha's unit, then she can be putting out a vulnerable with her shots, and she can be yelling out something to put out the panicked. It's pretty strong. Then we've got just a naked unit of Silence Men. To be honest, I was kind of lost when building lists for Erik, and Silence Men don't ever feel like the wrong thing to include. And they can maybe help the Reapers. with their panic bombs. Then we do have the unit that the list was kind of built around, which was the House Harlaw Reapers. I took Carl, Asha's champion, the 1-point Carl, for extra duelists in them. The reason for this is not because I was planning on assassinating things. Every time I've run this unit, I was never planning on assassinating things with Carl. He is there, so he can force that big panic check, so it's guaranteed they're at least going to have to make a panic check if they pass all their saves off my no keyword attack. And the +1 wound does kind of put us in that territory of, oh, maybe we can one-shot something now. My last unit is a unit of Drowned Men. A third unit of bows might have been better, but these are all Greyjoy units, and the Drowned Men can help all of them. So I kind of like where we're at there. For non-combat units, I went with Wendemere, Baron Blacktide, and Roderick Harlaw, because I wasn't expecting to be playing the type of game where I need Baelish. But in retrospect, you always kind of need Baelish. There's not a ton of reasons not to run him. Rather than randomly generating a mission, my opponent had pre-picked it for this game when we were playing Clash of Kings. Terrain was placed across the center of the board pretty much. I placed a palisade centrally the way I like, and a bog off to the left. My opponent placed the corpse pile, which I was actually okay with because panic damage go burr, and a set of stakes. Overall, I was pretty happy with the terrain placement this game. It pretty much either blocked charges or deterred them, and my Drowned Men can always give a unit rerolls if they really need it. I placed my 2 bowmen on the flank, slightly favoring my left side of the board. I like putting bows on the flanks like this. It's really nice, especially when my opponent doesn't have cav, because at some point my bows wind up getting flank shots on their units. The rest of my force I deployed centrally, hoping the Silence Men and Drowned Men could help the Reaper do the Death Star thing. The Reapers also got Erik's starting pillage token. The rest of my hand my opening hand was pretty good. It had Finger Dance and Raiding Call, which are 2 really good early game cards, especially when you're running units with pillage. You can get them out there early. And I had Erik's on attack card, which can give rerolls, vicious, or precision for pillage tokens that you spend. The nice thing about this card, and I'm not saying Erik Commander's good, but the nice thing about this card is that the pillage tokens still count for the attack. So I can remove the pillage tokens from my Reapers, have them attack, and still give them rerolls, give them precision, but then also be able to really bump that damage with the panic, because they still count as having the pillage tokens for the attack. Going into round 1, the opening play patterns here are very typical. I gave my opponent first turn, and he took letters with Bowen, weakening the Reapers. On my turn, I played Finger Dance on Asha's bows, and I put Baron on the bags to remove the weaken token, influencing Asha's unit as well. My opponent then activated and moved up Coldhands. At the start of my turn, he used Tack Repo on the John Hunters. I then went with Wendemere on Crowns to gain an order token. On his turn, he moved up his Watch Marshal, wanting to leave the swords open. I actually activated with Asha and moved up to threaten the middle of the board, pivoting the bows to help facilitate that. Here, my opponent then activated his Sworn Brothers and moved into range of the bowman. I did some math here because it was obvious he was going to use Sentinel to get shots on me. I probably should have waited in retrospect, but I figured the tempo of not letting him have swords and me getting to double tap at the start of the next round would probably be worth it, considering I probably don't drop below 6 dice from getting shot by the crossbows. So I have my Drowned Man hand out the rerolls, and I play Roderick to the swords. Through shields, I managed to strip away 3 wounds, which is pretty good considering, Night's Watch deck doing Night's Watch things. On his turn, he activates the Golden Company Crossbowmen after sentineling up on my turn, and he shoots me, only doing 3 wounds. I will trade 3 wounds on Bowman all day for 3 wounds on Sworn Brothers. After this, I just move up Erik's unit a bit and hang back to help contribute to whatever might happen in the middle. I'm not too eager to get too close to his army. Everything is just kind of explosive and deadly, so there's no reason to give him that. My opponent moves up with Jon, and I take a march with both the Silencemen and the Reapers, and I pass a Warcry at the start of the Silencemen turn to give a panic to the Sworn Brothers. Going into round 2, I actually decide to keep Erik's attack card. I always tell people if they don't see themselves playing a card pretty much immediately to pitch it. It was a risk keeping it, but the card seemed okay enough to keep. I was definitely planning on charging in with my Reapers, and they're going over hindering terrain. The fact that I could potentially give them the rerolls and I could potentially give them precision seemed pretty good. I just needed to not roll a 1 on the charge. And this was the conversation I was having in my head. It's not a great strategy. 16% of the time, this will fail you. The other card I drew was Iron's Endurance, and we do not so. Opening move, I put Baron on swords to take another shot on the Sworn brothers. I got 4 hits with a vulnerable token on them. My opponent decided to actually burn his Donal token, which I was pretty happy about. My opponent then used Bone on the bags to get a shot off with the crossbows, doing 6 wounds to Asha. On my next turn now, I decide I'm going to pop off the Wendy token and the Drowned Men to heal 4. I draw Kraken's Wrath off the Wendy. This is something I wound up explaining to my opponent multiple times this game, but it's worth mentioning again, just because it's important, and I feel like a lot of people forget this. The things that conflict are tactics cards and orders on units. Even though your NCU might have an order token, it doesn't actually have an order, so you can use Wendemere and Drowned Men at the same time, and it's perfectly fine. After this, I use Hot Rod to play We Do Not Sow, healing 2 more wounds to Asha's unit because my opponent has the bags. Say what you will about Greyjoys and their super lackluster and disappointing deck. On the rare occasion you actually get to use all their shit, it feels amazing. So I take another shot, and my opponent burns his last Donal token because I got 5 hits. So that was really, really good. Start of my opponent's turn, he drops Now His Watch is Ended on Jon's unit. He then activates his crossbows and charges my bows. I had anticipated this, so I hadn't activated my bowmen yet. He takes them back down to 1 rank. He got some pretty good rolls here. And at this point, I'm able to activate Wendy to get another token. I wound up putting him on the crown. In retrospect, maybe I should have put him on letters. I was worried about the zap going into Asha, but there's no way for me to die, so I really should have just let it happen. I do see an argument, and I'm not sure my opponent would have done this, because a lot of people don't really realize how to play into Baron, but he could have definitely tried to zap the Reapers to get the to get Baron's influence to fall off, which would have been bad for me, so maybe I made the right choice. Here's where the round gets a little bit more interesting. My opponent moves up Coldhands to sit on the leftmost objective, and then I do what Drowned Men actually kind of enjoy doing, and I YOLO them into my opponent's dedicated ranged unit. Obviously, they didn't do anything. At this point, the Watch Marshal moves up behind the Sworn Brothers to give +1 die, and I pull back my Silence Men to make room for my Reapers to charge in. My opponent then gets 7 hits off moving up Jon and taking a shot, but through Baron, thankfully, I only wind up taking 1 wound from this. At this point, I take the risky charge with the Reapers and roll a 1. Yep, definitely should have pitched the card, probably shouldn't have taken the charge, oh well. Here, I wind up doing the auto wound with Expert Duelist and wind up landing 5 hits. Through shields, my opponent actually passes all of his saves, but he still has to take the panic check because of the automatic wound from Expert Duelist. And because Reapers are actually pretty scary now, he takes 5 wounds from the panic. Reapers are seeming pretty good here, and if I hadn't flubbed my charge, it definitely would have been a dead unit. Almost definitely would have been dead unit with rerolls and precision. But they didn't die, and I got hit back 7 with 7 dice from the Sworn Brothers. I take 2 off the attack and crit fail my panic check for 3 more. This is the end of the round, and the Night's Watch player scores 1 point for having Coldhands on an objective. At the start of the next round, my opponent goes first. I really should have used a Roger token here, but I didn't, and I really should have been digging for What Is Dead May Never Die. Not doing that is a big mistake on my part. My opponent uses Stand United Brothers to enable the Super Broken combo with a Now His Watch is Ended. He attacks with both his Ranger Hunters and his Sworn Bros, killing Coldhands. I think it's really a shame that this exists in the game right now. In my opinion, this card should function like the Start Quest card. It shouldn't trigger off of like solos and monsters, and it shouldn't trigger off of NCUs dying. It's completely ridiculous and feels a little bit like playing into 1.6 Starks, and I stopped playing this game back then for a reason. Thankfully, Iron's Endurance blocks 3 hits, and that the Ranger Hunters wind up doing, and I keep the unit alive for a little bit longer. The Sworn Brothers swing in doing 4 wounds, and I somehow managed to pass my panic. Here's where the Roger token would have been good to hopefully draw the What Is Dead. Jon then activates and obliterates the Reapers. He then does the Super Broken Ranger Hunter thing and surges forth and shoots into the bows, somehow only doing 4 wounds. This entire time I was just really wishing I was playing Roost's Commander so I could at least do something. I would have really killed for one of his cards right now, or just a 3-up armor save somewhere in the army. On my turn, I also realized here's where Baelish would have been really nice. If I had Baelish, would have been able to use his once per game to control the swords, removing the weaken from the Silence Men, then would have been able to activate and charge into the Sworn Brothers. I am not looking to take that charge with the weekend. I would have been able to remove it because I had Blessed with Stone in my hand. I'm not looking to take that charge into Relentless when I'm weakened. That just feels like a good way to lose 7 guys or 9 guys, or I don't know how many Dice Not Much players are throwing at you. I just feel like they make it up every time they open their mouth. Being I didn't have any of that available as an option, I had to make some really tough and not great choices. I did use Wendemere at the start of the turn to heal, and I drew Gold's Allure. I then went ahead and also used the Roderick token, now remembering to use it, but I still didn't get what I needed. Being my opponent didn't have Aemon or Cons, I decided to block Bags. I could kill the Sworn Bros this round, and I feel like I needed to happen to get back into the game. I also decided to drop Baron on Erik's unit. If I could get a kill with my commander and keep him alive, I could definitely pull myself back in because of the way scoring works in this mission. At this point, my opponent then used Jon's other super balanced card and charged off the horses. I knew this was coming, but at least I got him to go into the Silence Men instead of Erik. To be honest, he probably could have killed Erik through Baron, but I don't need him to know that. He took them down to 4 wounds from the attack. At this point, with Roderick, I take the Swords with Roderick, play Kraken's Wrath. With the attack and Panic for the Silence Men, I do take the unit down to 8 wounds. My opponent then plays Donal to the letters, weakening the Silence Men, and I play Wendy to the crowns, getting an Order token. Continuing to the Eternal Battle that I'm just loving, my opponent swings with his crossbow into the Drowned Men, doing a single wound. On my turn, being Asha is incredibly safe in her current position, I am able to shift to the side with the Wendy token I just got, and then I'm able to shift up with her attack, getting me into Jon's flank. With Finger Dance and rerolls, she puts in work and takes them down to 3 wounds. They could die from the Panic here, but I'm hoping that they don't, so Erik's unit can do it, and sure enough, they only take 1 off the Failed Panic. On my opponent's turn, he heals Jon with Stand United, and brings the Watch Marshal over to break the Palisade. I should have paid more attention to what was happening here, but I didn't, and that's going to bite me in the butt later. Here's where I made that mistake. I heal 4 with Iron Price at the start of my turn, but then I should have activated, and then I decided to activate with the Drowned Men to buy myself some tempo. Doesn't matter here. I should have just swung with the Silence Men, healing only 2 and choosing to attack with full dice, and realigning the tray, so I wasn't just giving the Sworn Brothers a free charge for nothing. I know I wanted Erik to get the kill, but in retrospect, the Silence Men almost definitely don't get the kill here with the Weaken token. The Drowned Men do a single wound to the crossbow, so, you know, good for them. On my opponent's turn, he charges in with the Sworn Brothers. My Silence Men take 7 wounds from the attack and then fail the panic check. He dies. Then he actually surges back into the objective with the Sworn Bros. Here's where I think he made a mistake. He probably should have forgotten about the objective and surged forward to put pressure on me. But that's not what wound up happening. My turn, I go for the Hail Mary, and I activate Erik's unit. He shoots into Jon's flank, and then somehow Jon dies from a failed panic check. So there we go. I'm back in the game. I've killed the enemy commander with my commander. I score a bunch of points. He's got Sworn Brothers left at 1 wound. All of a sudden, I'm feeling pretty good again. On my at the start of the next round, round 4, my opponent brings in Coldhands. At the start of the turn, I then use the Drowned Men order to give Asha rerolls. I put Baron on Swords to protect Erik from the flank charge from Coldhands, and fire at the last Sworn Brothers. Sure enough, they die. The deck is out of cards to keep them alive. And at this point, my opponent concedes. Overall, I was pretty happy with the way the game went. Aside from the big mistake with the Silence Men, I feel like overall I played pretty well. I made enough good decisions and had just the right amount of luck to swing the game in my favor. Obviously, I feel like you don't have to say this, but Erik is not a good commander, and he requires you to play with some not good units. But his cards were actually not complete garbage. I really wish I hadn't rolled a 1 on that charge and gotten to see what the attack looks like with fully buffed Reefers, but that's the risk we take with melee attacks, and is why range combat's generally better. The Reapers were pretty good. Silence Men are always solid. The one downside I have to Reapers and kind of Silence Men is that they're susceptible to ranged and cav. On the turns you're not going first, your opponent can just kill them because they don't have Baron on them. And we're going to see a lot of ranged and cav this season, in my opinion. However, the one-shot potential Reapers have is really nothing to scoff at now. I filmed a few more games with them, so you'll get to see them on the channel, but ultimately I think I'm going back to cav for my tournament list. At least that's what I'm currently running in the Welcome to 2023 event. The combo now we can do with engaging a unit with Flayed Men with the Glory Seeker and then shooting into combat's really, really good because you're passing that panic check more than you're failing it with the Stubborn Tenacity, and then you're doing a wound, then your opponent needs to take him out, panic check with Intimidating Presence. It's really good, especially whenever you can out-activate your opponents. I do have to say that I feel like if you're playing against a very skilled Night's Watch player and they're running the super meta Jon Cavalry list, I don't think Greyjoys have much of a chance. We can give them a hell of a fight, but ultimately I think there are just too many obstacles for us to win that matchup consistently. I hope you guys enjoyed today's game. Let me know what you're running this patch down below. I'm super curious to see what everybody's thinking. Like to help us out with the algorithm. I'm really excited to get more content out there for Song, and subscribe because we've got a bunch more games coming soon. Until I see you all again, don't forget to have fun and roll some dice.